Hi, this is Katy for RustiKate and RustiKate DIY, and I'm here again with Sarah of Dan and Sarah Makers. They also have a YouTube channel. Our first collab video was actually two baskets that we did a dye project on to change the color. And then this one is kind of part two, but it also can stand alone. We're now taking those baskets that we've dyed to darken, and after they've dried and all of that, and now we're going to actually add handles to them. We want to kind of give it the look of the African like shopping basket, the African handmade baskets. So we're going to be making handmade handles and attaching them to the baskets. So I hope you guys will hang around and that you will enjoy this video. Alright, so we're ready to begin. First off, we start with using upholstery piping. We cut 60 inches for each handle and set it aside. Then we bring our basket over and we count down 3 rows from the top of the basket, and that's where we insert our first piece of the piping. We then count over 10 spaces, so 10 weave lines across the width of the basket, and that's where we'll insert it the second time. So there'll be 10 spaces roughly between the first insertion and the second insertion, which gives you that spacing of how wide the handle is going to be. Alright, now we're ready to go ahead and start the video, and we'll show you the whole process. I just wanted to give you that info before we begin. So Sarah's going to be demoing the first part, and she's going to be using upholstery piping for the inner layer of the handle, and then we'll wrap raffia around it. So this is actually an unbleached piping, but you can use bleached as well. And she's going to start out with 60 inches of piping for each handle.
The next step is going to be Katy tying the piping together. And you may need to kind of adjust all 4 strands so they're kind of equally spaced in the basket. Now, because we want to cover up the piping, we're going to thread some orange raffia. We chose orange for our color as an accent. And we're going to thread that through right along next to the piping. So right now we're just going to wrap each individual piece of piping separately, just at the very base, and then once we have it covered at the looping point, then we'll just start wrapping the raffia together on either side of the basket tiers so that it doesn't show the piping once you have a few wraps. That's looking pretty good. Now that the individual pieces of piping are wrapped, we're just going to start wrapping the sides of piping together, so 2 strands at a time. Once we've wrapped the piping up to a point where it looks like it would hit the edge of the top of the basket, we'll go ahead and just put a little slip knot in it to hold tension in the raffia. and then start working from the other side. Once you've wrapped each piping piece individually, you can start wrapping both piping pieces as one and keep wrapping it until you've reached the point where it's hitting the top edge of the basket again. Now you take the little loop out of the other side of the piping, the slip knot that you put in there earlier. Pull the two sides of the piping together and then keep wrapping all four pieces of piping as one. After you've wrapped it for a while, just so that you're sure you're kind of giving the piping an equal spacing on both sides of the basket, you can go ahead and put another slip knot in this side and then work on the other loop side of the basket. We are back. We've completed both sides of the basket handle, and so now we need to just meet in the center. And we're going to tie in a little more raffia and then use the shorter lengths to hold it in place as we add more raffia on. So kind of overlapping as you go. There's a few sticker outers in there, wispies, whatever you want to call them. You can always trim them off later. The main thing is to just keep the whole thing really taut as you keep wrapping. So adding a little more raffia in and kind of mushing the knot down as best you can. And it may not be super obvious to see on the video, but that smooths out pretty well.
It's also going to be under a layer of batting, and then the leather strap will go over the top, so it'll all balance out.
And then just tie a knot somewhere on there. It's going to get covered up with leather, so it doesn't have to be beautiful. Just strong. Now that we have the raffia wrapped around the handle and tied off, we're going to add a little bit of batting to, it's just a scrap of batting, to the handle itself. And just wrap it around a few times, because what we're looking for is a consistent kind of padding on the handle. And then we're going to wrap that with leather. Alright, so we have some small pieces of leather here, and I just draped the leather around the edge of the handle and eyeballed it. So what you want to do is just kind of wrap the leather around, and you'll just start stitching from one side and around the other side. What I did is I just poked holes with my industrial sewing machine needle and no thread in the machine, But if you don't have an industrial machine, you could use a very thick needle on a regular sewing machine. You could also use an awl or a punch. Some Cricut machines will allow you to cut this for certain types of thin leather. And so you have lots of options. Just be creative as you go. You could even wrap this, like wrap this around and then wrap thread or thin leather strips around this if you wanted. So just be creative.
Alright, so for the next step we're going to go ahead, we're going to use a long upholstery needle. This one is about 5 inches long, has a sharp point on it, and then the thread that she's going to be using today is actually a waxed synthetic thread. It's in kind of an ecru or off-white color. Just inserting it back to front. And she's going to be taking a stitch that's about, we'll say 1/8 of an inch for this one. And you can tell with the leather it's a little bit tough to get it through, but just work at it and you'll start to get a good rhythm. And if you do have a lot of trouble with it, then you can use, like Sarah was talking about, some of the other options for making larger holes, such as the punch. You can also, in a pinch, you can use a drill or a Dremel with a really small drill bit. And that would enable you to almost lace the thread through instead of having to use a needle. After you finish this side, then you're going to do the exact same steps to create a matching handle on the opposite side. And the upholstery needles are pretty sharp, so you want to make sure that you stitch away from your body so you don't poke yourself, and then also pay attention to where your fingers are at in placement so you don't stab your fingers.
So here is what the handle looks like when you're all done. And you can see how it'll allow you to kind of gather the stitches up on the sides if you want to, or you could stitch a little more along the ends and gather it up that way as well. Alright, thank you for joining us on our collab video. It's been fun.
It has been fun. I hope we'll do a lot more in the future because, yeah, it's been an awesome experience.
Yeah. So we both have channels. We'd love for you to like or subscribe to them, and also leave us some comments on any ideas for collabs in the future. If you have a project you're interested in seeing us work on, let us know.
Yeah, and don't forget, if you do subscribe, to hit the bell in the corner and you'll make sure and get notified of all of our new posts.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, hopefully we'll see you soon.
See you
Thanks
later.
for watching.
Bye.